Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
We've noticed a lot of you are tuning in, which is amazing, but I haven't quite hit that subscribe button yet.
Yeah, and that little button, honestly, it's so small, but it makes such a huge difference in helping us reach more people with these important discussions.
Right. It's true. Like the algorithms, those mysterious forces that decide what we all see and hear, they pay a lot of attention to subscriber numbers.
Yeah, think of it like the subscribing. It's like casting a vote for quality content, So these insightful research discussions don't just get lost in the sea of all the information out there.
More subscribers equals more visibility. Right. And that means more resources for us to make even deeper dives for you.
Yeah.
Maybe bring in experts for interviews, even do some live Q&A sessions where you can jump in.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about building a community around research,
Yeah.
where curiosity thrives and knowledge is like shared and debated. Ever feel like you're just drowning in information? Like you want the core insights without wading through a million details.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Well, that's exactly what we're aiming for today.
Absolutely. Cutting through the noise.
We're diving deep into the legacy of someone who's fundamentally shaped how marketing works.
Someone whose name you might not know, but whose ideas you definitely encounter every day.
John D.C. Little.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of this as your cheat sheet to understanding a true giant of marketing science.
And the best part is we're basing this whole deep dive on a brand new article from Marketing Science.
Fresh off the press.
Yeah.
The Legacy of John Little for Marketing Science.
By Feinberg and a whole team of researchers.
It came out just this year, and it really takes a fresh look at a career that spanned, an incredible 8 decades.
Wow.
Little wasn't just about theory, though, even though he did some groundbreaking theoretical work. Like, think about queuing theory. Remember L equals lambda W?
Oh yeah, from way back in school.
That was Little. But he's also really passionate about making sure those fancy models were useful in the real world.
Right, bridging that gap between the ivory tower and actual marketing decisions.
Exactly. And that's actually the heart of what we're exploring today.
Because back in 1970, Little posed a really interesting challenge.
He basically said, hey, we have all these amazing management science models.
But managers almost never use them.
So why is that? That tension between having a really rigorous model and a model that's actually relevant that people will use, that's what we're digging into.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating is that Little's answer to that question is more relevant than ever today.
Especially in our world of data overload and algorithms making more and more decisions.
Right, so we're going to distill Little's key ideas, so you can walk away with a rock-solid understanding of what really matters in marketing.
A foundation that helps you cut through the noise and the hype.
Okay, so let's start with Little's solution to that central problem, this tension between rigor and relevance.
He called it decision calculus.
Decision calculus. What's that all about?
It's not just about building a model that's mathematically elegant.
Okay.
It's about having this whole philosophy for how you build models.
Right.
Models that decision makers will actually trust, embrace, and use confidently.
Interesting. So it's almost like thinking about the psychology of the model user as much as the math of the model itself.
Exactly. Like Little really believed a good model should be an extension of the user's own thinking.
So it helps them think through the problem more clearly and make better decisions.
Precisely. So how do we build models like that? Well, the article lays out 6 key desiderata, Little's must-haves for a truly effective model.
6 desiderata. Okay. What's the first one?
Simplicity.
Okay, so keep it simple. But when Little said simple, he wasn't saying ignore the complexities of the real world.
No, not at all. What's really cool here is that Little wasn't advocating for those overly simplistic models that miss all the nuances.
Yeah, those can be dangerous.
He was drawing on this idea of Occam's razor, the idea that the best explanation is usually the simplest one.
Right, so cut out all the unnecessary extras.
Exactly. A model should really zero in on those essential factors that are actually driving the results.
But not at the expense of ignoring important details, right?
Well, the article really emphasizes that while keeping things clear and focused is crucial, you don't want to oversimplify to the point where you're missing key elements.
Like what?
Well, like how different customers might behave differently.
Segmentation, targeting.
Exactly. Or how things might change over time, or even how competitor strategies might influence what you do. The model needs to be understandable, yes.
But it can't be so simplified that it's no longer reflecting the core of what really matters.
Precisely. So the first takeaway for you here is that effective models, they're not about showing off how complex they are.
It's not about impressing people with fancy math.
Right, they're about laser focusing on those drivers of results.
Think of it like essentialism for your marketing models. I like that. So that's simplicity. What's the second desideratum?
Robustness.
Okay, robust. What did Little mean by that?
To Little, robustness was all about trust.
Okay.
A model shouldn't just work in those familiar situations, the ones you've seen before.
It needs to be able to handle new situations.
Exactly. It should hold up when you're trying to apply it to new scenarios, things you haven't encountered before.
Interesting.
And it should accurately reflect what you already know, like its predictions for past events should be on point.
Gotcha, so it's reliable.
Right. But crucially, it shouldn't give you nonsensical predictions when you're looking at those new situations.
So it's not just about being right about the past, it's about making sense in the future.
Yes. The article gives this great example. Imagine your advertising model is telling you that the best strategy is to constantly advertise in these tiny, tiny bursts, like all the time.
Okay, that sounds a little strange.
Right. That should be a red flag.
Like, that's probably not right.
Exactly. It suggests there might be something fundamentally off about how the model is built.
Interesting.
Little was a big believer in really stress testing models.
Push them to their limits and see if they break.
Exactly. See if those predictions still make sense even when you're pushing the boundaries. So for you, robustness means having a model that you can rely on.
Even when you're venturing into uncharted territory.
Precisely.
So it's a model that won't predict the marketing equivalent of perpetual motion.
Exactly.
Gotcha. All right, what's the third principle?
Easy to control.
Easy to control. Okay.
Yeah.
What was Little's thinking there?
This goes back to the idea of the model being an extension of you, the decision maker.
Okay.
Whoever's using the model, whether it's a marketing manager or a researcher, whoever, they should be able to understand how to get the answers they need.
Right. It shouldn't be this black box where data goes in and a decision pops out magically.
Right. And even more importantly, you should understand why you're getting those answers.
So transparency is key.
The goal is to build your understanding, to give you this new lens through which you can analyze your operations.
So it's not just about getting an answer, it's about learning from the model.
Exactly. As Little himself put it, a model should be yours. It should be an extension of your ability to think and analyze what you're doing.
I like that. So for our listeners, ease of control means that the model puts them in the driver's seat.
It empowers them to explore different scenarios, to ask what-if questions, and understand the why behind the answers.
That sounds way more useful than just being told what to do.
Absolutely. Okay, ready for desideratum number 4.
Hit me with it.
It needs to be adaptive.
Adaptive. Okay. This feels especially relevant today, with how fast everything in marketing is changing.
You got it. Little knew that the world doesn't stand still, and neither should our models.
Right. If a model can't keep up with the times, it's going to become useless pretty quickly.
Exactly. So an adaptive model needs to be able to incorporate new information as it comes in, new insights, changes in the market, even the evolving needs of you, the user.
So it's not just about responding to the external world, it's about responding to the user's needs as well.
Absolutely. A good model should be able to take in new data, use new analytical techniques, reflect those new theoretical understandings, and even address new questions that pop up.
Wow, that's a lot to keep up with.
It is, but in Little's view, if a model can't adapt, it's basically on its way to becoming obsolete.
So for our listeners, adaptability means having a model that stays fresh, relevant, and continues to provide value over time.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, on to number 5.
Okay, lay it on me.
Complete on important issues.
Complete on important issues. This one sounds a little more complicated. What exactly did Little mean by that?
For Little, completeness meant making sure that your model includes all the key factors.
All the things that really drive results.
Exactly. Now, this is where the article gets really interesting because Little actually advocated for using subjective data if hard data wasn't available.
Subjective data, like opinions and gut feelings.
Exactly. Like think about the opinions of experienced people, for example. If there's no hard data to go on, you can use that.
That's interesting. So he wasn't a data purist, necessarily.
No, but here's the key point. He always stressed that this subjective input should be replaced with hard data as soon as possible.
So use what you have, but always strive for better, more objective data.
Exactly. The article mentions how excited he was when UPC scanner data started coming in.
Because it finally gave marketers hard data about what was actually happening at the checkout.
Exactly. It was replacing those gut feelings about how advertising worked with cold, hard facts.
That's a huge shift.
It was. So for you, completeness means that the model considers all the factors that truly matter, even if some of that initial information is based on expert judgment.
Right. So use what you've got, but always be on the lookout for better data. All right. We're on to the sixth and final desideratum. What is it?
Easy to communicate with.
Easy to communicate with. This seems to be a recurring theme, making sure that the model is accessible and understandable.
It's crucial.
Yeah.
Because often the people who build the models and the people who use the models, they're speaking different languages.
Right. They have different backgrounds, different priorities.
Exactly. So if the model takes forever to churn out results, or it requires inputs that you don't understand or can't provide, it's simply not going to be used.
It'll just sit on a shelf gathering dust.
The user needs answers and insights that are relevant to their needs and that come in a timely manner.
And in a format that makes sense to them.
Exactly. It's about bridging that gap between the technical details and the realities of making real-world decisions.
So for our listeners, easy communication means the model speaks their language. It provides insights in a time frame that's useful to them.
And in a way that helps them make better decisions.
So these 6 principles: simple, robust, easy to control, adaptive, complete, and easy to communicate with, they form the core of Little's decision calculus.
They're like the guiding principles for building models that are both scientifically sound and practically useful.
And what strikes me is how user-centered this whole approach is. Even back in 1970, Little was really focused on the needs of the person using the model.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that the article argues that these principles were even more relevant today than they were back then.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, the user of models has expanded. It's not just marketing managers anymore.
Researchers are using them too?
Exactly. Researchers rely on models all the time to understand those complex marketing phenomena.
Like competition, consumer behavior, all of that.
Exactly. So Little's ideas about simplicity and adaptability, they're crucial for making sure those academic models are insightful and useful.
So they can actually be applied to real-world problems.
Precisely. And then there's the whole issue of data.
Oh yeah, we have so much data today. It's almost overwhelming.
Right. We're practically drowning in information. And that's where Little's principles come in. They give us this vital framework for navigating that data deluge.
So we don't just end up throwing data at a problem and hoping for the best.
Exactly. His principles help us build models that actually serve a purpose, that prevent us from just mindlessly using complex algorithms without really understanding what we're trying to achieve.
So it's about being smart with the data, not just having a lot of it.
Right. You need to have a clear goal in mind. You need to understand what questions you're trying to answer.
And what about algorithms?
What about them?
So many marketing decisions are now being made by algorithms. Do Little's ideas still apply when the decision maker is a piece of code?
They absolutely do. In fact, the article points out that Little actually predicted this trend.
Wow, he was ahead of his time.
He was. And his principles are fundamental to how we design, calibrate, and apply the decision rules that drive those algorithms.
So even though the decision-making process might be automated, we still need to make sure it's based on sound principles.
Exactly. Those automated systems need to be built on models that are understandable, robust, and reliable.
Not just black boxes spitting out recommendations.
Right. So for you, the listener, this means that even the algorithms making marketing decisions should be grounded in clear, transparent thinking.
That makes a lot of sense. And the article even touches on something that's really hot right now. Large language models.
LLMs, yep.
It's interesting to think about those as models within Little's framework.
Absolutely. When you start thinking about them that way, Little's principles become super relevant because LLMs are trained on data, and their fine-tuning is a form of model building.
And they're constantly evolving, just like the marketing landscape itself.
Exactly. So Little would undoubtedly emphasize the importance of understanding user needs, of developing those models iteratively, and of drawing on diverse data sources.
To make sure those LLMs are comprehensive and reliable.
Precisely.
So Little wasn't just about big ideas, he also made some really concrete contributions to marketing science.
Oh, absolutely. The article highlights a bunch of his groundbreaking research.
Like what?
Well, His early work coincided with these major developments in things like queuing theory and optimization algorithms.
Right, those were hot topics back then.
They were. But in marketing specifically, he made some truly pioneering contributions. For example, in 1966, he published this really influential paper on advertising experiments.
What was that about?
He basically came up with this practical rule for designing effective experiments. Experiments that would actually help you understand the impact of your advertising.
Ah, so you could actually measure whether your ads were working.
Exactly. And then there was the Mayukh model.
Mayukh, okay.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
This was developed with Leonard Lodish back in 1969, and it was all about tackling this really tough challenge.
Which was?
How to allocate those advertising budgets.
Okay, across different channels over time.
You got it. So Mayukh was innovative because it combined managerial input with mathematical optimization.
So it was a blend of human judgment and hard data.
Exactly. And that gave you this structured way to create media plans.
Plans that would actually maximize your effectiveness within your budget constraints.
Right, which is something that all marketers are grappling with.
So Mayukh was a real step forward in helping marketers make those tough spending decisions.
Absolutely. It was a game changer.
And what about Branded? That sounds like it was pretty advanced for its time.
Oh yeah, Branded was a big deal. It came out in 1975, and it was one of the first truly integrated systems for optimizing your whole marketing mix.
So not just advertising, but pricing, distribution, the whole shebang.
The whole 9 yards. It really showed Litter's ability to connect marketing strategy with those powerful tools from operations research.
So it allowed managers to test different scenarios, see what the impact would be, and make more informed decisions.
Precisely. It was a precursor to all the marketing mix and media allocation tools that we have today.
So in a way, Brand-Aid was giving marketers a glimpse into the future of marketing optimization.
It really was.
The article also mentions Little's work on understanding how advertising works, this aggregate advertising models paper. What was so important about that?
That 1979 paper was foundational. Little really dug into the existing research on advertising and how it worked over time.
Okay.
And he identified these key challenges, like understanding the long-term effects of advertising, how it plays out in a competitive landscape, all of that.
So he was looking beyond those immediate short-term results.
Exactly. He formalized concepts like carryover effects, which is the idea that advertising continues to have an impact even after you stop running the ads.
Right, so it's not just about that initial burst of activity.
And he talked about diminishing returns, the idea that as you keep advertising, the impact of each additional ad gets smaller and smaller.
Okay, that makes sense intuitively.
He even talked about the strategy of pulsing your advertising, running it in bursts rather than continuously. And he proposed these 5 core principles about how sales respond to advertising, taking into account competition, the content of the ads themselves, and how those effects change over time.
So he was really trying to build a comprehensive framework for understanding how advertising works.
He was. And that framework continues to guide research in the field today.
And it helps marketers, like you think about those long-term impacts of their advertising efforts.
Exactly.
Then there's this hugely influential paper on using the Logit model of brand choice with scanner data. That sounds like a major turning point in understanding consumer behavior.
Oh, it absolutely was. This was the 1983 paper with Peter Kodani, and it was a landmark moment for really quantifying consumer choice.
Okay, what did they do that was so groundbreaking?
They took this model, the multinomial Logit model, and made these subtle but crucial changes.
What kind of changes?
Changes that allowed them to measure key behavioral concepts like brand loyalty, how sensitive consumers are to promotions, how price sensitive they are, all within a framework that could actually be analyzed with the computing power they had back then.
So they were pushing the boundaries of what was possible with the technology at the time.
They were. And a really key innovation was how they used past purchase data to understand consumer behavior. They basically smoothed out a consumer's purchase history to get a better understanding of their loyalty to particular brands and even sizes.
So they were looking at both short-term and long-term behavior.
Exactly. And that allowed the model to reflect how consumer behavior changes over time and how different consumers behave differently.
So it's a really flexible and powerful model.
It was. And its impact has been huge. It's basically a cornerstone for pretty much all the work on consumer choice modeling that's been done since then. And it's still taught in university courses today.
Wow, so this one piece of research really did have a lasting impact.
It did. It's one of those foundational pieces of work that everyone in the field needs to understand.
The article also mentions something called cover story. What was that all about?
Cover story. That was developed for Ocean Spray back in 1990. And it was this really forward-thinking system that took all that sales and promotional data from supermarket scanners and put it into this easy-to-use interface.
So it was making that raw data accessible and understandable for managers.
Exactly. Managers could quickly get insights from that data and actually use those insights to make better decisions.
That sounds a lot like the marketing dashboards we have today.
It was definitely a precursor to those. And it's a perfect example of Little's decision calculus in action. Taking those complex models and making them user-friendly, embedding them in a system that people could actually use.
So it was all about bridging that gap between the technical side and the practical side of marketing.
Absolutely.
And it seems Little also ventured into more traditional behavioral science research as well.
He did. In the 1990s, he co-authored some really interesting papers that looked at things like consumers' latitude of price acceptance.
Latitude of price acceptance.
It's basically the range of prices that consumers find acceptable for a particular product.
Okay.
And he looked at how the content of advertising could actually make coupons more effective.
So he was really getting into the nitty-gritty of how consumers make decisions.
He was. And these papers were really neat because they combined controlled experiments with the analysis of real-world scanner data.
So he was bringing together different methodologies to get a more complete picture of consumer behavior.
Exactly. And that just shows his commitment to really understanding the nuances of how people make decisions.
So Little's impact wasn't just confined to academia. He also had a significant influence on the marketing industry itself.
Absolutely. As a co-founder of Management Decision Systems, or MDS, he was directly involved in taking those theoretical advances in marketing science and turning them into practical solutions for businesses.
So he was bridging that gap between theory and practice.
Exactly. And the merger of MDS with Information Resources, Inc., or IRI, really amplified his impact. Because IRI was a pioneer in using scanner data to improve retail strategies and advertising strategies.
And that's something that's become absolutely essential for marketers today.
It has. And Little's focus on integrating data, modeling, and decision support really laid the groundwork for a lot of the marketing analytics platforms that we rely on today.
It's amazing to think about how far-reaching his influence has been.
It is. He was a true visionary in the field.
And he was also instrumental in the creation of the Marketing Science Journal itself.
Oh yeah, that was a big one. At a time when the field of marketing science was really taking shape, Little, as president of the Operations Research Society of America, teamed up with Frank Bass, who was the president of the Institute of Management Science. And together, they funded and supported the launch of marketing science.
So he was shaping the very landscape of academic research and marketing.
He was. And later on, he played a key role in merging those two organizations, the Operations Research Society and the Institute of Management Science, to form INFORMS. And he became its first president. So his legacy is not just about specific models or research findings, it's about building the infrastructure for the entire field to flourish.
And that benefits everyone in the field, from researchers to practitioners.
Absolutely.
It sounds like he was also a fantastic mentor to his students.
By all accounts, he was. The article specifically mentions his co-authored paper with Peter Guadagni, which was published while Guadagni was still a master's student.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is. And Little was known for dedicating a lot of time to his students, offering guidance and ideas. But he often preferred not to be a formal co-author on their papers.
Why is that?
He wanted to make sure that his students got full credit for their contributions.
That says a lot about his character and his commitment to nurturing the next generation of marketing scientists.
It really does.
So the article wraps up by talking about this idea of rigor by relevance. What's the main takeaway there for our listeners?
This is really important. The article argues that in today's world, being relevant isn't just some nice-to-have bonus alongside rigor.
It's actually what defines rigor.
Exactly. With all the advances in AI and machine learning, there's this danger of models becoming just reflections of the data.
Without really revealing any underlying principles or insights.
Exactly. And for a theory to be really valuable in a practical field like marketing, It needs to be externally valid.
It needs to actually work in the real world.
Exactly. A theory that's internally consistent but doesn't hold up when you try to apply it, that's not good science.
Yeah.
We need to see our research through to what the article calls the last mile.
What does that mean?
It means actually looking at the marketing actions that our models suggest and then validating our predictions with real-world results.
So it's not just about building a model that looks good on paper. It's about building a model that actually leads to better marketing decisions.
Exactly. So for you, the listener, rigor by relevance means that the best marketing science is the science that actually makes you a better marketer.
So Little's emphasis on simplicity, ease of control, and communication, those become even more critical in the age of AI.
Especially for ensuring that those AI models are transparent and explainable.
So we can actually understand how they're making decisions?
Exactly. And his focus on robustness, adaptability, and completeness, those help to build trust because they ensure that our models are valid, that they deliver what the article calls unsurprising science.
Reliable results that you can actually depend on.
Precisely.
It's fascinating that the article mentions how Little often asked his colleagues whether there are fundamental laws of marketing. Given how complex human behavior is, that's a really interesting question to ponder.
It is. And while the difficulty of finding those universal laws makes discovery incredibly challenging, it also makes it all the more important.
And Little's work, with its focus on both rigor and relevance, provides a really strong foundation for that search. So to sum up, John Little's legacy isn't just about his specific models or theories. It's about his user-focused philosophy of decision calculus.
The idea that marketing science should be both scientifically sound and practically useful.
And his principles are incredibly important for navigating the complexities of modern marketing, from dealing with massive amounts of data to understanding how algorithms are shaping the field.
He's given us this timeless framework for making sure that our models aren't just mathematically correct, but that they actually provide practical, understandable, and trustworthy guidance for making real-world marketing decisions.
Decisions that ultimately impact all of us. So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. Considering Little's emphasis on both the theoretical and the practical, and his persistent question about those fundamental laws of marketing, what would you say is a potential candidate for a fundamental law in our ever-evolving field? What are those principles that consistently hold true across different industries, despite all the changes in technology and consumer behavior? It's something to ponder as you continue to explore the fascinating world of marketing.
That's a great question. And perhaps thinking about those enduring principles is the first step towards uncovering those elusive laws of marketing.
Thanks for joining us.
And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.